Hello there, so I'm calling this one Healing Journey in Tenerife. And it all begins the day before Waxara and I are ready to travel to this beautiful island. And I just get up from sitting and suddenly my back is thrown out, so I'm in a lot of pain. I'm thinking, great, what way to start? Never mind. So got on the plane and did the 4.5 hour journey, and as I expected, it's really incredibly painful. It's never good sitting in airplanes at the best of time, but with lower back pain, that was pretty challenging. And I was really grateful to arrive in the light and find a way and get the hire car and do the drive. And despite the fact being in quite a lot of pain, I absolutely loved the drive. It was such a beautiful experience, just seeing the landscape and the environment. And the road is incredibly good condition motorway, pretty much brand new, so a very easy drive. And what we're doing, we're travelling from Tenerife South Airport all the way to really close to Tenerife North Airport, funnily enough, and our destination is La Laguna, and this is where Waxara's family lives and where she was brought up. And one thing I want to say to you about the motorways in Tenerife is you need to be aware of the fact you don't get much notice. So when there's a sign telling you to pull off to the right, if you're used to English roads or even French ones, and you get the idea that you get the sign there's going to be quite a while to wait, and then you turn, no, it's really fast, so you miss the turning to La Laguna, which for me is a blessing in disguise, because that meant we arrived in the beginning of darkness in Santa Cruz, which I believe is the main city in Tenerife, and just so exotic. And of course the other thing I forget, you get hit by the warmth. It's so wonderful to have the heat. Just loving the heat. And Waxara and I didn't have a clue how to get to La Laguna, so we ended up driving around the city, which was like really interesting. And here's a funny thing, because it was coming on to 8 o'clock at this point, which in England everyone is tucked up in their houses watching TV or on the internet. Well, people are just finishing work at that time of day, so that is like peak rush hour, so find ourselves in some fairly heavy traffic jams, so good chance to look around again. And finally we managed to find the right road, and there we are on the motorway to La Laguna itself. And this is one of the most extraordinary motorway journeys I've ever done, because basically what happened is the road points upwards, and that's it. We just go up and up and up, and 10 minutes later we're still going up. And eventually I realised we were going up a mountain, and that's what we're doing. So we go up a mountain for about 20-25 minutes until finally we arrive in La Laguna. And pretty dark, so not really able to get much of a sense of what the place is like, but it just feels different, and I really like that. And then finally we arrive at Waxara's parents' house, a family home where she was brought up, and it's one of these really big metal gates which they slide across, and there it is. Instantly I'm in a different world, and I'm so grateful for this experience, because when we travel as tourists to different countries, the disadvantage is we're like in our own little bubble, and we're having our own experiences, interacting with people, but it's a sense of we're in a bubble. The wonderful thing about when you go to a country where you're welcomed by people who live there is there ain't no bubble, because you're immediately immersed in the culture. And I don't have any ability to speak Spanish, and Waxara's parents really don't have any ability to speak English, and as people always say at this point, it doesn't matter, and it's true, it doesn't matter. And I was so grateful sitting down to have a meal. I was starving by this point, I'm sure we both were, and it was great. So it was like fresh tuna done with a special variety of Tenerife potatoes, and Before that we had a vegetable soup, like a puree, and for dessert we had strawberries and yogurt. So I was just so grateful and delighted. It felt so wonderful to have this food. And then the other thing is, it's not hot there. I mean, it was hot at the airport, hot all the way to drive, but La Laguna itself, no, it's a lot colder, because of course we just drove up a mountain to get there. So that's hardly surprising. So here are a few images to show you what Waxara's mum and dad's house looks like, and to show you what it's like outside as well, and to show you the view. And this is going to be the subject of the whole of the film, but I just want you to, I want to say in this one that what is really interesting about being in this house is this is a house that Waxara's dad envisioned, decided with his unbending intent he was going to manifest, and he built it, and the family helped, including the girls. So there's 4 girls and 1 boy, and they all helped build this house. So the sense of being in a house that the family built, that gives me such a sense of connection with a place which I'm so very grateful for. And another really interesting indication about just what the climate's like is we've been there about half an hour, and then Dad comes in with loads of wood and lights a fire, for which we're very grateful. And this is what you expect in a lot of the countries in the warm parts of the world. There is no central heating, this is it, so very grateful to have the fire and enjoy the flames and see the huge plasma screen TV dominating the room with lots of Spanish TV. And the first thing you realise about Spanish TV is it's loud, and people talk a lot. They talk all over each other and they shout over each other, and that pretty much sums up the vast majority of all the TV I saw while I was out there. So it's quite amusing and interesting. And then following day, it's like, right, we're here, it's great. And I'm realising by this point that whatever is wrong with my back is actually far more serious than I'd imagined. I'd hoped that I'd just have a bit of a rough day and I maybe have a night to get over the being stuck in the aeroplane, the seat and the flight, but no, I realise I've got serious problems here. And so speak to Waxara's sister Yaisa, and she knows of a good healer who's an alternative therapist, and he's a chiropractor and an osteopath and a masseur and does various other forms of healing. A Piscean guy, a really great guy. And so we arranged that day for me to make an appointment for the following day. And so my trip to Tenerife, which is primarily to visit the family and also secondarily to have a holiday and be in the sun, had this completely different direction it was taking, because it was actually about, okay, so I've got a serious problem and I can't really walk or move, and I'm going to have some experience with some alternative therapy. So that was what was arranged. And the first full day, it really was this matter of taking everything in and really realising how incapacitated I actually am. Sitting is painful, walking is painful, lying down is painful, it's pretty much all painful. And I became aware that human beings, we have these 4 states of being. I want to define the human existence in the 4 states of being: lying down, sitting, standing and moving about. And when all 4 of these are painful, wow, that really is something, but that's actually how it is. And just got to deal with it, because that's how it is. And Waxara's parents were no strangers to issues with backs, and perhaps I'd had a fairly charmed life because back pain had not been a huge feature in my life, but I'd had issues with it the last couple of years, but this is far worse than anything else. So they came up with all sorts of things. They came up with some ointment to rub on the back which heated it up, which really helped for a little while at least. And then they came up with various strange devices which basically, it's like Velcro and it's elastic, and you wrap the thing around you and it gives you some support. And I tried one and it was like, whoa, that was interesting. And I tried another one, oh, that was a bit confusing and complicated. And I definitely wasn't really too good about the driving, but hey, Due to the way things were with the rental car, Waxara was not insured to drive, and I was. So, yeah, each day there was driving involved. It was me doing it, and we had to rapidly revise our plans and various places I wanted to go to. I really wanted to go visit the volcano. Forget it. There's no way I'm going to be able to survive that kind of a journey, because it's going to be narrow roads, snaking to the left and right up a hill, or a mountain, obviously, and it would just be agonising. So I actually never got to do that. And that was a big feature about the trip and about the healing aspect of it is, okay, let's see what we can let go. We'll let go of this, let go of this, let go of this. And it was just necessary to do that. And still enjoyed our time there. In fact, we did go on a drive the next day, and we just went even further up the mountain. So I should explain, La Laguna itself is up a mountain. Waxara's parents' house is further up the mountain, and we went a little bit further up the mountain to like a high point and just have a look around, and it was so beautiful. The vegetation is just so beautiful there. There's a sense of vitality in the air, in the soil, in the plants, which makes me feel really good. So despite the pretty much continual pain, I'm really enjoying it because of the vitality of the place. I feel really good about it, really good about being there. And then the colours of the vegetation, there's lots of yellow flowers of different sizes and shapes, and the colours of the greens are very vivid, and you've got succulents, you've got cacti, and you've got pines, and you've got plants that you recognise in England. The whole vast variety up there is different than in the south of the island. The south of the island is like semi-desert, and the plants, well, they look like cacti and succulents and dry plants, but here there's a good diversity of plants, so I love that. Really great. So I had my first treatment with a guy, and I apologise to the guy because I can't remember his name, but I can't. So it was a pretty extraordinary session, and he used all sorts of different techniques on me, and it all felt quite weird, to be honest with you. And I thought, well, let's see how it goes. It was a good, decent length of time session, €25, which I thought was incredibly good value for the amount of work that was put into it. And I thought, well, I'll just see how things go. And unfortunately, I didn't really feel any better, to such an extent that I then arranged for another session and went back a couple of days later, and he did some more work. And here's a few images that's showing you the image of the clinic. So really unusual clinic, because first you walk in the door and you see Tibetan singing bowls on the table and images of the Buddha, and then the actual treatment room that's all wood panelling. And in the second session he went a lot deeper, and he had me on this massage table, and he would put my body onto my side, put my body into a particularly rather complicated position of me folded up in this way, legs and arms in some peculiar position. He'd kind of wrap his arms around me, grab, and he would do a sudden jerking, pulling motion. And the next thing I knew, I was making these really bizarre sounds, like, it's hard to describe, that kind of thing, very sudden, very unexpected. And I felt pretty freaked out, actually, and also felt pretty frightened as well, and that was kind of surprising, because he felt like a really trustworthy guy, but there was some fear I was tapping into. And a little bit later on in the session, he said to Waxara, and I was so grateful to have someone who could interpret for me. And that's a really great thing about being in La Laguna. The thing about being in La Laguna is, like, pretty much no one speaks English. And I was really grateful for that, because I find when you go to a place where no one speaks English, that means the whole tourist thing isn't happening. You're living where the people live, and that's something I enjoy so much. So at a particular point he asked a question, and he said, did you have any serious injuries as a child to your back? And I thought, no, can't think of anything. And I thought, duh, of course, yeah, right. So, sexual abuse, gang rape, men aged between 10 and 11. So I communicated that, and I had Waxaris translating it into Spanish and something like along the lines of muchos hombres, and I got all that. And he kind of, you could see he was taken aback by it, and he realised, okay, yeah. So, and this actually was my big breakthrough, because there I was quite early on in our time there, and I realised that the reason I had this thing with my back is because it was time for me to do yet more healing. Now, bearing in mind I started healing the sexual abuse thing in 1991, and we're now talking about 2017. Now, for goodness sakes, how much longer does this go on? But, well, here it is, it's continuing. And so that was very much a realisation. So the other thing that's really noticeable about this part of the world is you can park pretty much anywhere and you don't have to pay, which sounds really cool. And the downside is there's nowhere to park because there aren't any parking spaces, because every single fraction of the street is occupied with cars, and if there are parking spaces, they're really tiny. It can be really difficult to get into. So really early on, I realised what we were going to have to do is look for a multi-storey car park, which is what we did. They're all really small, but it meant that you could actually drive in and park somewhere, so that was brilliant. And when it came to walking around, that was a bit novel, because I noticed after a short length of time that wherever we went walking, people were always looking at us. And after a really short while, I realised they were looking at me, because I was like hobbling around some kind of a hunchback, and that's pretty much what I looked like, some kind of seriously deformed cripple. So I was like, well, that's a whole other experience to have while I'm being here as well. Walking was extremely painful, there's no question about it, and so it really limits our ability to do stuff. But nonetheless, we did do a bit of stuff, and sorting myself out with some additive-free tobacco was a dream I had, and I just scored so highly because I managed to get hold of organic additive-free tobacco money too at an incredibly cheap price. So that was like, wow, amazing, so good. And I so enjoyed the limited amount of walking that I was able to do, just touching into the reality of the place and enjoying its differentness, and realizing that, because this is off the coast of West Africa, folks. The thing we have to remember, when you fly there, you don't necessarily realise this. And I was wondering, to what extent is Africa influencing Tenerife as a place, culturally, people? The answer is pretty much approximately zero. Really, the best way to imagine Tenerife is it's like a piece of Spain that's been broken off and dumped in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean off the West African coast. That's the best way I can explain it to you, because the culture, everything about it intensely in obviously Spanish, and also pretty much a complete absence of any Africans. Couldn't see any at all. So that was really noticeable too. So after we'd been there for a few days, it was finally time to do the trip to the beach. So I journeyed to the beach. First of all, what we did is we drove to Waxara's sister's house, and that was just a couple of kilometres away. And it's basically looking from the house where I'm staying, it's just downhill. And so we just drove down the mountainside and got there. And because I was in so much pain, Isa drove us from her home to the beach. And it's a 20-minute drive, and we basically drive all the way down the mountain, down that motorway, and you can see this is what it looks like. And then we find ourselves in Santa Cruz. And it's around about the last days of the carnival, because we're in March, and I just wasn't able, because of the pain and everything else, to be able to take any photographs of these people. But people basically dress up in totally mad costumes, pink hair, whatever they want to wear, totally crazy stuff, and they get really drunk. And that's what the carnival's about. So you get really drunk, stagger around, and wear really outrageous clothes, and have a good laugh. So you can see signs of all this going on. And the other thing, we couldn't drive to the beach in the normal way. We had to take like a detour and go through all the dockland areas because all the main roads were blocked off because there's loads of drunken people staggering around and wearing really crazy clothes. So we finally made it to the beach, and there you are. This is your iconic photograph of the beach. There's that beach umbrella type thing which has got that thatching material on it, and you can see this colour of the sea. It's just that beautiful blue, colour of the sky, that beautiful blue, just wonderful. And it was a whole load of degrees warmer, which is really great. And there was one other thing though. There was a really strong wind blowing, and I mean really strong, and the only thing that is at all sane is basically you get on the beach and you lie down flat on the sand, and that way you've got very low profile to the wind that's blowing. You don't notice it so much. But after about an hour of lying on this beach, first of all in the sun and then under the sunshade thing to protect ourselves from burning, it was like, dudes, this is pretty insane, because the sand is just stinging our skin, and hey, let's get out of here. So we did eventually, and we did, and thank goodness we did actually. And then we drove all the way back, and at La Laguna we stopped off at a restaurant. It was an Italian restaurant, and the food was just totally incredible, divine and wonderful. And Waxahachie had a salad, and it looked like the kind of salad that 4 people would eat. The portions were gigantic, quality was just amazing. So that was such a lovely thing to do after a rather wind-blown experience on the beach. And so our stay continued, and I managed to take photographs of the house and around the house, and you've seen some, you can see some more, give you more of an idea. And the pain was my constant accompaniment, and I tried lots of things, and eventually I succumbed and was given, what happened is Waxahachie's dad went out with Waxahachie, and they came back with these ampoules, and they gave me, because Waxahachie's parents have experienced lots of health issues, her dad is trained to give injections, so he gave me an injection in my bum with an anti-inflammatory, and it helped to a certain extent, and I'm very grateful for it. So that was another part of my healing journey, experiencing anti-inflammatories being injected into my body. So hey, and finally, we did also visit Yaisa's home, and we also visited Waxahachie's brother's home. He's called Miguel, if I remember rightly, yeah. And another little part of the story here is that not only did Waxahachie's dad build a house that they all lived in, and not only is it huge, existing on 3 floors, but also he bought some land, and his plan was so that each child, if they wished, they could have their own home on the piece of land that he owned. What an amazing father, eh? And so both Yaisa and her brother have got their plot of land on this land that he bought, and they've got their own houses. And so you can see that's Yaisa's house with the theme being brown, and there's Miguel's house with the theme being white. So I got to visit both of them, which is really great. And finally, after about 5 days of being there, it was time for us to do our big trip to go to stay at a place near Los Gigantes. So it means we'd be leaving behind the north of the island, actually not going to the south, but going to the west. And it was an incredible journey. If I'd been able to film it, I would have done, but Waxahachie did the filming, so you're going to get to see some of it. So this is our journey, and it started off, and we made I made a pretty, how can I put this, it was like a spur of the moment decision. Let's not go on the motorway, let's go on the small road as much as we can that follows along beside the motorway. And so that's what we did to start with, at least. And La Laguna just fades into a whole series of small villages, stroke towns, which are just joined together, one to the other. So that's what we experienced first of all, and lots of shops and places to eat. And it still had that really strong feeling, this is where people live, this is their lives, this is not touristy at all. And it went along like this for a while, and there was one thing that I really wanted to see, and this is the one thing we actually had a success with, because when you look on the map of Tenerife, the tourist information people give you, there's this thing which looks like a giant tree, and it's like thousands of years old. So I thought, well, I love plants, I'd like to see a tree that's thousands of years old, and so that was kind of our plan, that we would get to see that hopefully. And eventually we came to a town, I can't remember the name of it, and that was where the place of the giant tree was. And so this is where I actually managed to do a little bit of filming myself. And so we found a car park and we get out, and you can see this is the scene with this going up these steps, you can see, and then a lot of people. This is my first experience of tourism in Tenerife, and I had an instant revulsion to it. I instantly felt really uncomfortable. There's loads and loads of people, and because I'm walking like a weird cripple and I'm in a huge amount of pain, then just having a load of people didn't feel too comfortable. But hey, whatever. And so finally made it to the place, and I could see the tree, and it would have been possible to get down there and go right up the tree, but there was no way I could entertain the idea, so I took these shots from a distance, and that's the best I could do, just recognise, hey, a really cool tree, which we did. And we really wanted to eat something, but I really wanted to get out of that area. It was just too hectic, and so we then found ourselves back on the road. And this is perhaps such an extraordinary experience. The road's really narrow, and I'd seen it on the map. I was aware it was going to be like this, but basically we'd had, from my perspective, loads of bends in the road pretty much all the way, but that was nothing. This is where we get the really serious bends in the road, and we're going up yet another mountain, and within only about 5 or 10 minutes we're suddenly in thick fog. So here I am driving, loads of pain, really thick fog, hairpin bends all the way. Exciting or exciting? Yeah, absolutely mega exciting. And after a certain point I managed to find somewhere to stop. I'm so grateful I managed to stop there. And at this point Waxar and I are not getting on too well, lots of tensions are coming up, a bit of an argument situation going on, so yeah, it's quite challenging for us too. And she's had to put up with someone who'd been in pain for all our trip, so it can't have been very nice for her either. And then, okay, let's continue our journey, and if it's possible to imagine, the road gets even more extreme and the fog continues, and the bends are hairpin, and there's these huge drops, so it's quite a scary drive really. And just realising how incredibly slow I'm driving about 20 miles an hour, and there's no way I could drive any faster, because otherwise I'd just be shooting off the mountain side. So this is just how it is, and it just goes on and it goes on, and all of a sudden the fog vanishes and we can see again. And so here's some more footage of what it actually looks like, and we're really in the nature. We've left towns and villages behind. It's wild, no sign of any tourism whatsoever, until finally we get to Santiago del Teide, and this is like the last indigenous town, really, people living their only lives. So that's Santiago del Teide, and from this point onwards, this is where we look very carefully for the right road, and this is the road that's going to take us to the west coast, to Los Gigantes, and the actual town where we're going to be staying. And it took us hours. This journey took us hours, about 4 or 5 hours, and I thought it was going to take 1 or 2. I had no idea how it was going to be. And finally we're going down such incredibly steep slopes, and the hairpin bends are continuing, but we can see the sea. It's so exciting to see the sea. And then finally it's like being a whole other world. It's tourism central, places heaving with foreigners, loads of hotels, restaurants, bars, everything. It's like I'm in a completely different world. Now, I don't know this at the time, but this is like really gentle tourism. This is like not particularly touristy, but for me, it was like a huge shock because it just looked incredibly touristy. And we had a bit of trouble finding where we were going to stay, and Waxhar was on the phone to the guy over and over again because he basically gives us absolutely appalling directions, and we just have to keep asking him until finally we found it. And then, of course, the next thing to hit us is, well, there's nowhere to park, because that's how it is. There isn't anywhere to park. And eventually we managed to find this place, incredibly luckily, not too far away, which is really good, because poor XR, yet again, is having to carry all the luggage because I can't carry anything because the pain's too severe. And we find ourselves in our apartment, and so here are the classic shots that you get to see. It's a dream come true because they're looking out of the balcony, and I can see the sea, and there's a beach, and it's like, I just want to get in that water. I would so love to get in that water. I know there's no chance. The way I'm feeling, wouldn't be able to do it. So that's just how it is. And we make ourselves a wonderfully simple meal, and one of the things that is so good in La Laguna is being able to go to the markets and buy really incredibly good food. And I didn't go into this. In previous films, I've always done new shots of markets, but I wasn't capable of doing that. I couldn't carry my iPad anywhere really. So all I can say is lots of market stalls in the markets and incredibly wonderful fruits and vegetables, really massive variety. So we stocked up before we left La Laguna. Had a wonderful meal, just loads and loads of vegetables, and it was absolutely delicious, really great. And so we then had a whole day there and very, very much enjoyed it. And actually I decided to take a chance, and I did actually get into the sea. And the first time it was really difficult, and when we got in again and I was able to swim that time, the water was absolutely gorgeous. It was so wonderful. And I had my experience of seeing a whole other side to Waxhara's character and personality, because being a water sign, being a Scorpio, when she gets in the water she becomes this completely different person who's completely in tune with the wonders of the element of water. So it was a great blessing to experience, but I was really limited about how far I could walk there. It really is how it was. And things like vegan cafes, you know, the kind of stuff you get where there's a real diversity of people, and lots of funny looks and stares when I'm staggering along the street, which by now I'm really getting used to, and it's actually very amusing. I just thought it was funny. I like being able to experience being a different person in different situations. And we managed to walk to within sight of the sea, which is really lovely. But to see like chain stores, things like Subway and McDonald's, that was kind of, it was funny. Yeah. So we had a lovely time there, and then it was time to get the rental car and do the last drive and get back. So what I want to do is now to summarise for you, which is I had no idea when I was going to Tenerife that I'd be going for major healing work, and I forgot to mention it, so I'll mention it now. I had a third healing session with this guy, and I could feel that although I was still in pain and still couldn't walk properly and still twisted up, I could tell that what he was doing was working on me on a very, very deep level. And so this is what I want to share with you. One of the main things I got from my experience in Tenerife is to realize that you can do healing work through lots of alternative therapies. You can do it with Reiki, which reaches certain parts. You can do it with shamanism, which goes infinitely deeper because it's got a pedigree of, some people say 40,000 years, some people say 100,000 years. It's got that real antiquity thing going on. And you can do so much more with an ancient system of healing like shamanism. However, what my whole experience with my back and my health in Tenerife taught me is that for people who've had really deep trauma, what it does is it goes into the physical structure of the body. And despite everything I've been doing to heal myself for like way over 20 years at this point, I suddenly found that that event with the back the day before leaving England precipitated me into this whole healing journey. And I sought this guy out, and he was doing work on me, and I could tell he was releasing from my body negative emotions and actual physical trauma from the physical damage that was done to my spine when I was a child, decades later. So I'm actually so grateful for every single thing about our experiences in Tenerife, and even our arguments and our difficulties we've had on that one particular day that we were driving, everything. So I want to just kind of round off with some images now. So a huge thank you to Waxara's parents, and you can see there's images of them there standing outside the house. Really lovely people, very loving, very kind and very generous, and I felt so well looked after and so at home there, and that's a great gift. And just a little clue, which is that there is just going to be this other film which is going to come out, and I'm going to go into detail about her dad Miguel's story and about this house and about things, other things as well. But just the feeling of having made a connection, and the feeling of this isn't somewhere I've just been to visit, this is somewhere I'll be returning to, somewhere that we'll be returning to. And I feel very emotionally invested in the islands, in its energy, and I can really say this because sometimes people travel in these different countries and they get these different experiences, but really my experience of Tenerife is people's kindness. Yeah, people's kindness and understanding. And that's, I guess that's one of the reasons why we travel, isn't it? So we get these awareness of that we're all human beings, we're all on this miraculous journey together, we're all having these great experiences, whether they're pleasurable or painful, they're all great experiences. And I've recently been reading a travel book, and there's the photograph of the book, so you can see what it is if you're interested. And this is basically a young woman in her 20s, and she suffers from electrosensitivity and a highly sensitive nature. And I'm the same, but I've learnt to handle it a lot better. But when you read her book, she just goes through horror story after horror story, after nightmare in her experiences. And here's the gold. So alchemy is transformation. The old age view of alchemy you might have read about from old books would be alchemy is transforming base metals into gold. Well, that's all bollocks. Alchemy is, it's a human process. All humans have the capacity to be alchemists. And as human beings, what we do is we transform the shit in our lives into gold. And that's very much what's going on for me. So I'm on this ongoing healing journey. And at the end of the film, at the end of my time in Tenerife, that story is not over. That's really obvious. And that's going to be the subject of another film too. But just a sense of gratitude. And this is what I'm picking up on. Despite all the pain and difficulty about being there and the restriction and not being able to see even a tenth of what I would like to have seen, is a sense of aliveness. When people go through these challenging experiences and these health issues, you become aware of how alive you are and how connected you are to that source of life. And how you appreciate life. So, it's all good, as people say. So, thank you very much for watching this rather disjointed film with my rather peculiar narration, which has been done in a state of duress and pain as I continue my healing journey. So, thank you all.